So welcome back to a updated version of my HTML course. In this course here, we're going to talk about how to do HTML and CSS, which is what you need to get started on making websites. And the way that things are going to work in this course here is that we're going to have a bunch of small videos that are going to be inside one playlist, which I will link in the description. So in case you can't find it, it's down there. And essentially, we're going to have a bunch of small videos, and all these videos are going to form up one big website that you at the end will have built yourself, which basically means that you can take these lessons one at a time until you have a website if you just got started, or if you need to learn something specific, you can just sort of like skip ahead to whichever video you want to learn something specific about. It's going to be very chill. We're going to have a session here at the beginning where we talk a bit about what exactly HTML and CSS is and what you need to get started in order to get into making websites. Now, for people who are curious about what exactly you need in order to get started on making websites, essentially all you need to have is a computer. And that's pretty much it. You can get started on making websites just with a computer. You don't need to install any additional software. You can essentially just get started straight away because the computer has software on it, which is in Windows case, Notepad. And if you work on Mac, it's going to be text editor. But essentially you can use these as text editors in order to build websites if you want to do that. But it's not really recommended since it's not really the best text editors you can get out there. There are other text editors that are more specifically designed for making websites or other different types of applications. So you probably don't want to be using the standard Notepad and text editor. Even Notepad++, which I see a lot of people use, is probably not the best to use. And so it's still quite a bit far behind when it comes to a editor you might want to use for building websites. So I will give some recommendations on a couple of editors that I do think that you should take a look at and just consider installing. So with that said, let's actually talk about these text editors here. Now, there is a lot on the market. I could probably fill up my tab at the top just full of text editors I could recommend. But I do have 3 particular text editors that I do want to talk about, since these are the most popular ones that you will typically just kind of find out there when it comes to people recommending text editors. So the important thing to note here when picking a text editor is that it needs to work for you. Because a text editor, like I said, is just a tool. And as long as it does whatever you need it to do properly, then it's going to work for you. Now, a very popular recommendation that most people will probably recommend is Visual Studio Code, which is a text editor that's been made by Microsoft. It is completely free, so you don't need to pay anything for this text editor here. This is a very good piece of software if you want to, code in many different types of languages. And it's just really neat when it comes to organizing your project. And it's very good at just sort of like recommending what you're about to type and say, well, are you trying to type this particular thing? And then you just click a button and then it auto completes things for you. So it has a lot of different features that are just really nice to have when it comes to making websites. Now, the second one I do want to recommend is one that I also use next to Visual Studio Code. I sometimes swap between them, which is Atom. And Atom is a much more lightweight version of a text editor that can do a lot of the same things as Visual Studio Code. But like I said, it's a little bit more lightweight when it comes to a lot of the features it has. Whereas Atom just kind of like works out of the box. So, there's a couple of things that are different between these two editors, but there's nothing really important that you need to really can I make the wrong choice here? Because you can't really do that. A lot of people that choose based on the visuals because they're so similar. So whatever one you think looks the best, just kind of pick that one and it will work perfectly fine for whatever you're doing here. The last one I want to mention is one that I used to use back when I was studying multimedia design 10 years ago or something, which is a text editor called Sublime Text. Now, Sublime Text is a very popular choice by people for some reason, because technically it is free, but the full version is something you need to buy, whereas the other two that I just talked about are completely free. So having a text editor like this that is technically free, but it will keep recommending you to buy the full version whenever you're using it, is not really something that a lot of people think is nice to use. And again, this text editor is going to do pretty much the same thing as the other two text editors. There's nothing really in particular that stands out that is something you're going to have to something that would make you buy this one over having the other two free ones. Because I know there's kind of this thing where if something costs money, it's probably better. In this case here, that's not true. So don't buy a text editor because it costs money, so therefore it has to be better. Instead, try and go for one of the free ones, because I promise you, I have this one. I have the paid version of it because I paid for it back when I studied multimedia design many years ago. I would not recommend getting this one because first of all, I don't think it looks as good as the other two. And second of all, it costs money. So if you're completely in doubt about which one of these three you want to get, just try and look up a video or something that compares these editors in detail so you know which one you want to get. But for my particular case here, when it comes to the tutorials we're about to do, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code since that is the one that most people recommend when it comes to making websites. So once you downloaded and installed a text editor, in my case here, Visual Studio Code, we're going to go ahead and get straight into how to just kind of like do things in here, you know, just set things up so you have everything ready for when you actually want to make a website. So the first thing I want to point out here is that the first time you're going to open it up, and the same thing goes for the other text editors, there's probably going to be a tab that is like an introduction to the text editor. It's most likely just going to talk a bit about the different features that it has inside the text editor. So what you can do is just kind of uncheck. If there is like a small check mark, you can uncheck in order for it not to show this again in the future whenever you start up the editor. Just uncheck that and close down the tab at the top here and just close it down. So you want to reach this point where you have no tabs open so we can actually just kind of like start from here. Now, what I want to show here first is how to enlarge things in case you want to be able to see things on your screen. If you're sitting in here and you think that everything is just kind of like too small or too big, what you can do is you can hold down Control plus, and then you can zoom in or Control minus in order to zoom out again. And of course, if you're sitting on Mac, that's probably going to be Command plus and Command minus. Now, this is going to enlarge in everything, but if you just want to enlarge in the text and not just the, all the UI elements, what you can do is you can go up into File, go down to Preferences, Settings, and in here you can see we have a font size that you can change. So in my case, I'm using 24 because I'm teaching and my big screen is going to get squished down to a small video. So you're probably going to want to see something a little bit bigger than what you're probably going to have inside your text editor. So in my case here, I'm using 24 pixels because it's just going to be easier for you to see on video, but you can use something a little bit smaller if that's easier for you. What we want to do here is we want to create our first document and talk a bit about how to get started on setting up our website for the first time. Now, whenever we're just making a website using HTML and CSS and no backend languages or anything like that, we can do so very easily just by creating a folder on our computer and then putting everything inside the website inside that folder. So essentially what you want to do here is you want to create a new file. So you can go to File and say New Text File, or you can click Control N and then it's going to open up a new one for you. Now, in our case, we want to be using HTML and CSS. In this case, it's just going to be HTML to begin with. So what you can do is you can go down to the bottom right corner right beneath my face cam. And then you can see we can change the type of text or markup or programming that we want to use inside this particular document here. So what I'm going to type is HTML and click enter. So now it sees this as a HTML file for whenever we want to get these recommendations that pop up, to autocomplete things, to change the colors of the markup properly so you can actually see the markup in a much more organized way. All these sorts of things are going to start happening once you actually choose the right document. Now, you don't have to go down to the bottom and actually choose this down here. What you could also do is just kind of save your file and then go to wherever you want to save this. So in my case here, I could, for example, save it inside my desktop. So what I did here is I actually went ahead and went to my desktop and I created an empty folder called Websites. And inside of here, I'm going to right click, create a folder, and I'm going to call this one Portfolio. And again, you can give it any kind of name for your particular website. I'm just thinking, let's make a portfolio together where we can learn to do all these different website things to build a website. So I'm just going to call my website Portfolio, and it could be Portfolio 1 or something if you're going to have more than one. Just give it some kind of name. And the important thing here is that everything, and I do mean everything, that you put inside your website has to go inside this folder here. It doesn't matter if it's an image, if it's a video, a font, if it is a file, anything that you go and put inside your website has to go inside this folder here. And the reason for that is later on when we do actually need to upload the website to an online server, all your links are going to get broken inside your website if you decided to place things randomly inside your computer. So if you're using an image inside your website and you found it from inside your image folder on your computer and you just link directly to that image inside the image folder, then things are going to get broken. So make sure you make a copy of your images and put them inside your website folder and then link to those particular files. Okay? Very important step. So what you want to do here is you want to create a document. And in my case, as you can see, it actually called it untitled1.html. Now, if you didn't save this as a particular extension, so if you didn't go down to the bottom right corner and actually changed it to HTML, it is not going to have a extension. So if you decided not to change the file type before you actually saved the document, what you could do is you could just go in here and give it some kind of name and say .html. And then it's going to know automatically, oh, okay, so this is a HTML document. So you don't have to go down the right corner like we just did and change it. You can just go ahead and just save it as a HTML file, and then it'll know, okay, this is HTML. Now, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go ahead and save our front page to our website. Because usually I like to create the front page first, because that makes sense. It's the landing page that people land on when they get into your website. So I'm going to go ahead and create the front page here. Now, the typical thing that you want to make sure that you do is whenever you create your front page, the page that needs to load up whenever people type in the address to your website has to be named index.something. So in this case here, because we're using HTML, it has to be index.html. Very important, you don't call it frontpage.html. You don't have to call it homepage.html or just home.html. It has to be index.html, okay? And the reason for this is that when you actually upload it to your online server at some point, those servers are going to look for a file that's named index. And if that doesn't exist, then it's not going to load up a front page for the user to actually land on. So you have to name it index.html. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and save that inside my portfolio. And with that, we now have our front page ready for us to actually start doing things to. Now, there is one more thing we can do in order to make this even more organized when we actually start working on our website, since this makes this a lot more easier to just overlook when it comes to multiple files, which is that we can actually go ahead and open up our entire folder and have all the files within that folder showing on the side here. So if we go up to File and I say Open Folder, then I can go in and choose my portfolio, say Select, and then you can actually see that we suddenly get it over here on the side. Now you may be getting a pop-up like I just did here. Just make sure that you say trust the authors and all the files in the parent folder websites. And just go ahead and say, yes, I trust the authors, because it's just going to be us touching whatever's inside those folders. So you don't need to worry about when it comes to like giving permissions or anything like that. So just go ahead and say, yes, I accept, and just close it down. So with that, you can now see that we now have a portfolio folder, which is the one that we created with the website inside. And I do have my file called index.html right here. If we were to click it, you can see we open it up, and then you can actually start editing it. Now you're going to notice that it has kind of like a cursive writing at the top here. If I double click it, it's going to change to a non-cursive version, which means that, okay, if I swap to another file, this file is still going to remain open inside my editor. So it's still going to be here, and it's going to open a separate tab for another file. So with all that said, let's talk a bit about what exactly HTML and CSS is. Now, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and HTML is not a programming language. I want to point that out here at the beginning, since I see a lot of people refer to HTML or CSS for that matter as a programming language. And a programming language is more of a logical language like JavaScript or PHP, C#, C++, those kind of languages out there. HTML is what we call a markup language, not a programming language, which means that we use it in order to mark up different content inside our website, because the browser needs to understand what exactly is going on inside our website, because otherwise it won't recommend your website to people on Google. So we need to tell the browser what exactly is inside this particular website. But there's also a second reason, which is that when we actually start getting into CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheet, then we use that language in order to actually make our website pretty. So whenever we need to tell the website that, okay, so the title should be up in the top left corner, or the image should be over here in the middle to the right or something, or these three things needs to be next to each other. So whenever we want to design the website and it has to look pretty, then the CSS needs to be able to grab the different elements and content that we have inside the website. And we do that by grabbing the HTML that is wrapped around the content. So it's not just to tell the browser what exactly is inside the website. We do also need to use it in order to properly style it using CSS. So HTML is very important to include inside your website. So with that said, we just have one more thing that I want to go over before we end off this episode, which is how to set up a HTML document properly the first time. Because right now it's just completely empty. But whenever you want to create any kind of page inside your website, there has to be some default things in there to begin with. Now, the cool thing about modern text editors, like for example, Visual Studio Code, is that you can actually go in here and click and make sure that you actually do have this registered as a HTML document, either by going down to the right corner or save it as a HTML document like we have done already. And once you've done that, you can actually go in and create a shortcut. So you can say HTML, and then you can see it pops up with some suggestions. So in this case here, you want to select the one called HTML:5. When you click that one, it's going to autofill all the standard stuff that you need to have in here to begin with when you want to create a page inside your website. Now, there's a lot of things going on here, and I don't want you to get overwhelmed immediately, so I'm just going to take these one by one so you know exactly what is going on here. So the first thing I want to mention here is that every single HTML tag has an angle bracket wrapped around it. So as you can see here, we have an angle bracket and an angle bracket, and in between those two, we have whatever the tag is supposed to do. So in this case here at the very top, we have something called !doctype HTML. And this is basically just to tell the browser that, okay, so this is a HTML document type. And it's not just HTML, it's the latest version of HTML. So this is technically called HTML5, which is the latest version that we have right now. And really, it's been so many years since HTML5 came out that we don't really call it HTML5 anymore. We used to do that back when I was studying. But nowadays we just call it HTML because it's just the standard within HTML nowadays. So basically this tag here is just to say, okay, so we have a HTML5 document. The second tag don't actually need to have this language attribute. So we can just go ahead and delete that. But basically we're just saying that this particular tag means that now the HTML document starts right here. And we have a closing tag at the bottom here, which is the same as the beginning tag, except that it has a / in front of it. So this one at the bottom here, we would actually call a closing tag because each of these individually are called a tag. So we have the closing tag and then we have the opening tag. And then both combined is called a HTML element. And everything that goes inside the HTML element is part of this particular tag here. So we're saying that everything inside that is right here is actually part of the HTML page that we have here. The next thing you can see is that we have a head element that has some stuff inside of it. And then we have a body element that doesn't have anything inside of it. And the important thing to note here about these two elements is that the head element basically is just going to provide the browser with some information about the website, which is called meta information. And it's not really going to be information you see inside the website. It's just going to be there to tell the browser something. So it's not any front end that you can see inside the website visually. It's just kind of there to give the browser information. But now anything that goes inside the body tags is what you actually see with your eye inside the website. So whenever you want to put an image inside your website, whenever you want to put titles or paragraphs or any kind of text inside your website, that would go inside the body tags. So right now we do of course have some default things inside the head element, and I just want to go over what exactly these are. So the first one here is just going to tell the browser that we're using a particular character type. And this is just the default standard that you want to be using, which is UTF-8, which is just going to allow for the right type of characters that we typically use inside a website. So this you don't need to question too much. It's just kind of like to tell the browser what characters we're using. And the next one that we have down here is actually something we can delete, because this one is more of a, if you want to target certain older browsers, like older versions of Internet Explorer, then this one could be something that goes in here to say that, oh, well, I want to target that particular browser. And I'd say that in 99% of cases, we're probably not going to be making websites that are targeted older browsers. We kind of expect people nowadays to have Edge or Chrome or Firefox or something. So we don't want to have this in here. We just go ahead and delete this one. This one's not necessary. The next one here is very important though. This is the one that actually allows for our website to become responsive. This means that if I want to see this website on a tablet or a cell phone or inside a browser on my computer, then the scaling of the content doesn't get scaled correctly if you do not have this meta tag inside your HTML. So this particular tag here is very important to have. So basically what we're just saying inside this tag here is that we want to do something with the viewport, and we're telling the browser that we want to do that. And we want to do something in regards to the content, and we want to make sure that the width of the device is scaled with a 1:0, so a 1:1 scaling when it comes to showing the content on different devices. Basically, just don't question this too much. You can always Google it if you want to get more specific into what exactly this does. And the last one down here is one called title. Now the title is what you see inside the tab inside your browser. So whenever you have a bunch of websites open, you have like different tabs at the top, whatever text needs to go inside the tab, that is going to be the one that goes in here. So right now it's called document, which probably doesn't make much sense to what we're doing here. So we can actually go and change this one to my portfolio, or maybe your name. So I could say Danny Crossing Portfolio, just so we have something that makes sense inside the tab at the top of the website. So for now, this is pretty much all I want to show to begin with, and you're pretty much ready to get started on making websites. With that said, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. At the end here, I'd love to say thank you to all the different patrons and YouTube members who is actually supporting the channel, as well as a special thanks to Kelly Corvey, who's actually sponsoring the channel for the month. So thank you so much. The channel wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all the different members. So thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time.